Hi everybody, Andrea Fox is here. Did you know that the Democrats of Greater Tucson has a website, thedgt.org, and if you subscribe, it's only 20 bucks. You can support this great weekly communication where folks get together. Sometimes there's candidates, sometimes folks like me pop on to help understand what's going on in the world. The Democrats of Greater Tucson, thedgt.org. Join up today.
Theresa Riel is a retired mathematics educator of 35 years. She has taught in public schools and for the last 23 years taught at the East Campus of Pima Community College. She is a dues-paying union member of Arizona Education Association, retired. In 2022, she ran for the Pima County Community College Board of Governors seat for District 2. In January 2023, she was elected chair of the governing board and served 2 years in that role. In January 2025, she was awarded faculty emeritus from Pima Community College. Theresa bought her home in Ward 6 in 1996 and raised 2 sons there. She has been a board member of Rosemont West Neighborhood Association for 24 of the 29 years she has lived in the neighborhood. And since 2019, she serves as president. Theresa volunteers at Sister Jose's Women's Shelter and is a big sister for Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Southern Arizona. Let's give Theresa a nice warm welcome to Democrats of Greater Tucson. Yeah, absolutely. Theresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Nice to see you all. Good afternoon. I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll tell you why I'm running for the governing board, and then I'm sure there'll be time for questions. When I was a young woman, I bought an apartment south of Reed Park in Citation Gardens. And when I had my first child, we quickly outgrew that house, so we moved up. We sold that one, and we bought a 3-bedroom apartment. And one day I did cloth diapers for my children, and so I was hanging them on the line, and I got written up for having a drying line in my enclosed patio. And it just infuriated me that here we're in Southern Arizona where we have, clothes can dry in 15 minutes on the line, but it takes an hour if you tumble them in the dryer. So the next time they had their association meeting, I went there and I was going to, demand that they let me, dry my diapers. And during the business part of the meeting, before they allowed residents to speak, they had a big concern because the valuation of Citation Gardens Co-op number 6 had been valuated at a level double what it had been the prior tax year. And so at the time I was 27, and I thought, well, I'm gonna take care of this. I'm gonna figure out what to do, and I'm gonna, make this better for all of us. And then I'll come back to the next meeting and say, if you want my help in this capacity in the future, you got to allow me to dry my diapers on the line. So I didn't really even know about property tax. I'd never paid my own property tax at that point. I was young. I'd already always rented. So I went to the county and figured out how you compare comps and all of that sort of thing, and how you file to have it be revalued. And it ended up that they did revalue it, and it went back down just a couple $100 more than it had been the year before. So it saved the co-op thousands and thousands of dollars in property tax. So long story short, not only did they change the rule, but they elected me to the board at that moment. And that was the start of my community activism. In 96, I bought this house. By the way, that was in Ward 6 also, I believe, right south of Reed, although maybe not. Actually, I don't think it is. But so I've lived in Tucson for my whole adult life. And like was mentioned before, I taught for 35 years. I taught math. And for a couple of years, I taught mathematics, but in Spanish at Pister Middle School for monolingual Spanish students who were here with their parents who were doing migrant labor. And so I have had wide and varied experiences teaching. So thank you to the woman who was concerned with TUSD. I think it's really important that communities, even if we don't have children in schools anymore, I think it's really important to understand what's going on, because all of that's going to affect all of us in the long run, right? The more educated our population is, the better off we all are. I was encouraged to run for the governing board in 2022 because the teachers union sort of felt that the governing board members were not paying attention to what was important about education, teaching, and learning. Having had that experience, they thought, well, Teresa's retired now, maybe she could, run for the governing board and make some positive impact. They had only received, employees had only received a pay raise one time in the prior 10 years. And that was one of the things I ran on, is that if we expect education to work well, we have to compensate our teachers and the other employees at the community college at a level that's, acceptable. Inflation went up 21% those 10 years, but they only had a $2,000 pay raise right in the middle of that whole thing. So basically, all of our Pima Community College employees lost a fifth of their buying power over that decade. Since then, we've brought a lot more transparency to what's going on in the college. We've brought back shared governance at the college, meaning, decisions, when one person makes a decision, sometimes it's not as good of a decision if all of the people that are going to be impacted by that decision have a say, or at least a voice at the table. So I'm really proud of what we've accomplished the last 2 years. Prior to my election on the governing board, there was a lot of disrespect and name calling on the governing board, and that was another thing that I wanted to change. I wanted to bring back, respect and consideration to the governing board members amongst them, ourselves now. And that has also been accomplished. So I feel really good about the first 2 of my 6 years on the governing board at Pima Community College. I was asked to consider running for this position. I did put my name in the hat last year for the temporary position when Karen Olick was appointed by the mayor and council. And, I was really impressed with the whole quality of the cadre of people who had put their name in the hat to be appointed. And I think that we're really, really fortunate in the Democratic Party. I think we have a lot of really good candidates. What separates me, at least in my opinion, from possibly the rest of the crowd, I guess, running for Ward 6 seat, is that I ran a successful campaign 2 years ago, and I'm going to do the same thing this year. And then also, I'm not currently employed, I'm retired, so I have the time to make sure that this city council job is my number one priority. I won't be stepping down from Pima Community College, but that's a non-paid volunteer position. And I'm confident I'll be able to do both. So why am I running? I think that we have an amazing city. And I think that electing the right people to serve in these positions is hugely important. I think that when you have a candidate like myself who has a really good mathematics background, I'm not afraid to look into the budget or the numbers or the statistics. At the community college right now, I'm sure it's like I'm a repetitive record. When they quote statistics inaccurately with a bias, many of us don't understand when there is a bias, and so things can be like sort of swept under the rug, or you might be voting for something because of what you were told as far as the mathematics and the statistics that's not actually factual. So I'll be bringing my math skills to the city council seat. The second thing is I am a strong advocate of education. I believe all of us need to continue our lifelong learning. And being on the city council is just another one of those opportunities to learn more about how the city runs and how I can contribute to make it more responsive to taxpayers and to citizens' needs. Oh, I just wanted to jump back one thing and let you know, when I moved here in 1996, I live on the corner of Broadway and Rosemont. It's right Midtown area. And there's a big, huge empty lot. And in 1997, it was being rezoned from a residential 1 zoning to a C1 to build infill on that corner. And at the time, a Walmart wanted to move in. The Walmart that was denied the rezoning there ended up moving over into Elkhorn and into an area that was already zoned commercial 1. But that was like my beginning of knowing about how to work with the city. We went through a rezoning process. The city and city council and mayor voted to rezone it from an R1 to a C1, which meant that now that it's rezoned C1, pretty much anything can go in there. So I live on the street directly south of that empty lot. And over the last, 20 some years, there have been 6 rezoning and redevelopment attempts. And every time myself and my neighbors get our neighborhood actively involved, and we worked really, really well with Steve Kozachik. He was an amazing council person. From my point of view, he always told us exactly where we needed to read, which laws we needed to look into, which plans were pertinent to this development, all of that sort of thing. He was amazing at the constituent services that we needed when we were concerned about that lot being developed, in our opinion, inappropriately. Many, many times it was rezoned, and it was the development plans were approved by council and mayor, but for some reason each time the developers, when it was approved, the developers pulled out last minute, so it's still an empty lot up there. By the way, empty lots are nice in some ways, but they're also problematic because, there have been homelessness in that area. There have been kids riding their quads and things like that. Just, it's crazy the amount of inappropriate use that's been going on in that property. I'm not against infill and development in empty spaces and in underused spaces, but I am concerned greatly with the fact that a lot of what has happened in the last development last year sort of removed all ability for neighbors to be involved and active in the process of voicing our concerns with redevelopment. We use the Broadway Craycroft area plan. We used a couple of different plans that the city had, agreed upon, and we had used some of the language in those plans, and the city zoning examiner actually said no to the latest redevelopment. And even though he said no because the development had went against a lot of the agreements that were in those plans in this area, mayor and council still voted to approve the development. And just some of the sticky points in our worries were they were having less than 0.74 cars per bedroom. And, we were concerned about not having enough parking space. It would overflow into the neighborhoods and the streets, making it dangerous for our children to go up and down those roads, going to school, etc. Just different things like that. So over the years, I've been actively involved in a lot of that, trying to ensure that what we, fully down, good girl, fully down. My puppies usually get a WALK right around this time, so they might be interrupting me occasionally. So anyway, I really believe that whoever we elect into that position needs to have a really great care and skill to allow neighborhoods to learn how to take care of themselves and protect their rights as neighbors to new construction or to new ordinances. And then also, I think we need to have a city council that's responsive to neighborhood needs, not just looking at it from one point of view, but looking at it from 360 degrees. So some of the areas that I'm concerned about are, our safety as far as police and fire. I know that both of them are underfunded. I come from a profession that's always been underfunded. Education in Arizona is always ranked toward the bottom of the nation. And basically, I believe you get what you pay for. And so I was out yesterday campaigning for the 414, Proposition 414 to raise the property tax. I know it's controversial. I personally believe that I will spend my, half a cent to ensure that we have what we need. So I am concerned about homelessness. I think that we need to figure out how to take care of our unhoused people. I heard recently that a huge portion of them are children, 18-year-olds who age out of our foster care systems. And then since they're not being subsidized by the state anymore, they just get booted out. You're an adult now, take care of yourself. So I think that, a lot can be done to lessen some of those numbers just by seeing if we can figure out how to take care of homelessness, especially the children who are recently aged out. I wrote a list of things I wanted to make sure I touch upon. Transportation in the city is always a concern. I ride Suntran quite often. I ride my bike. I also do drive my vehicle, but I think that our roads are in horrible conditions, as many of you know. A couple of months ago, I was at a site selector meeting where they had 7 site selectors from around the world, and they listed the 5 greatest things about Tucson and the 5 worst things about Tucson. Number 1 in Tucson, the worst thing was we don't have enough doctors and medical professionals. I don't think the city can do anything about that, but Pima College is doing a great job. We just opened up a new center of health professions that will contribute to the numbers of nurses and other medical professionals. But number 2 on the list of bad things was our poor roads. And anybody who's driven to or from the airport knows what horrible roads are around there. So we need to take care of that straight away. I know we voted on Proposition 411 a couple of years ago, but I think only part of what was supposed to have been done as far as the roads has been taken care of. Public safety and crime, affordable housing, economic stability and employment in the city, and then our infrastructure, just our roads and the whole way the city is being developed. So those are some of my main concerns.
We did already have in the chat room a request. How do we contribute to your campaign, Theresa?
Great, thank you. I will have a website up in the next couple of days, and it's my last name, and I'll type it in the chat. It's Riel, the number 4, Ward, the number 6.org, and there'll be a link there that you can contribute to my campaign. Also, if you're interested in signing my petition to get on the ballot, I think we need 700 some odd signatures for the Democratic Party candidates. You can go online. They have, it's one of the ones that you can sign up online, and that's really handy because, if you've not signed any petition before, you're only allowed to sign one of them, and so that would be great also. But there will also be a place on my website that will list that.
Theresa, I don't think people understand how important your math skills are. One of the reasons TUSD stays continually totally screwed up and misspends their money is because we have a bunch of board members who, as soon as numbers go up, their eyes glaze over. And so they don't even know what they're approving most of the time. To actually have somebody on a governing body who actually does the math, checks the numbers, knows what's going on. That's invaluable. You have my vote just because you have math skills and you're willing to use them. Because the TUSD board has one person who should have math skills, but he never uses them.
When I was running for TUSD governing board, I watched the 24 monthly meetings prior to my election. And on every single one of those meetings, there was some sort of graphic that was mathematically not necessarily incorrect, but just not complete. And never once did anybody ask any questions about that. So I'm going to agree with you, Lillian. I think it's really important to have by the way, I'm not perfect at math. I still make mistakes every once in a while. My kids roll their eyes when it takes me more than 5 seconds to compute a tip or something like that. But I'm not afraid of math, and I'm not afraid of stepping out there. So thank you.
Great, great. Ben, you have your hand up.
Yes, I actually have a question related to your concerns over development being in concord with the desires of neighborhood association owners. Many young people like myself don't see any pathway to owning a home. And the type of consultation that you've talked about really only benefits people with capital that own a home. And those of us who live in Tucson but are far, far away from actually owning a house themselves seem to be sort of left out of the bargaining process. So how can you ensure young people like myself and other poor folks who can't own a home that their desires will be part of the conversation as to where to develop and where to create opportunities for new housing in Tucson?
Thank you, Ben. I think that's a great question. So I believe our housing crisis is multifaceted, and I will talk about the young people in a moment. I'm just looking right outside my backyard, and there is a house that was developed it was refurbished 11 months ago, and it has been sitting vacant because no one can afford to purchase it, and they don't want it to be a rental. Whoever's, they're trying to flip it, right? So it's sitting there vacant. People jump the wall, and it creates problems for our police to come and patrol the area. So I think that one of the things that the city has to look at is when out-of-state developers develop these properties and they are charging high sales rates. If it's not going to be lived in, there's maybe some sort of, and I don't 100% even know how this works, but can we tax those differently? Recently, I got a tax statement, and I know that that's a county thing, but recently I got a tax statement for 2 properties that I own on the west side of town, right by the Pima Community College downtown campus. And I have to certify that either I'm living there, a family member is living there, it's a rental, or it's unoccupied. And so I'm assuming that there are different tax rates based on how it's being listed. And so why can't the city do something like that? So that's one of the facets. The second facet is all of the construction that has been going on in this empty lot by my house, Ben. None of it has been single family dwellings. So something a young person such as yourself could actually buy. They've all been rental properties. And so I think that the city needs to have a more concerted effort to encourage single family dwellings as opposed to multi-story high rises in some of these places. And it's not as lucrative for the developers, but I think that that's one of the things that the city could say, this has to be single family homes. I'm sure you're aware of some of the developments that the city has done around town that are small houses, so they're more affordable. And, it might not be your lifelong home, but it could be a starting place. And the city just needs to do more of that.
The question is, should the city continue trying to annex property to itself when it can't adequately patrol existing city areas?
I don't actually know everything. I just pretend like I do. And so that's one of my areas that I don't have any expertise. But I would assume that the reason the city wants to annex other areas is because they would get the property tax from that component being inside the city limits as opposed to being outside the city limits. One thing that I would say, just to jump back to Ben's statement about housing, I live here in Midtown, and when I was taking my dogs for a walk today in oh shoot, that name of that area just escaped me, but just right west of Craycroft, south of Broadway, Williams Circle. 250 Williams Circle is vacant and has been vacant since before COVID. 350 Williams Circle, it was a script save, and it's been vacant since COVID. And then right across the street, there is a 3-building, huge, all of these are businesses, and it's been vacant. It used to house Texas Instruments, but now Texas Instruments built their building just north, one property north of these 3. So right there, it's, I would say maybe 10,000s of the square feet that have been unoccupied forever and ever. So I don't understand why the city isn't being more reactive to using the properties that are inside city limits to improve our infrastructure and taking care of some of that homelessness, and encouraging businesses to move in some of the places that we already have, instead of maybe annexing and building outside of the city.
I have a question of my own, if you don't mind, Joe. I would like to have you talk a little bit about the policies and priorities and philosophy that's going to be guiding you over the next couple of years that you'll be serving on the council if you're elected, regarding sustainability, especially as regards our tax base and our environment, especially water, and housing availability, which are all problems here in Tucson and in across the country, really. So one of the big things that I'm concerned about is some of the ways that we zone currently are really quite unsustainable because we mandate so much infrastructure around car-centric development that oftentimes it's somewhat of a Ponzi scheme, putting off these maintenance costs into the future that really aren't sustainable with the tax base that the city is enjoying as a result of development. So we end up, underwater with a lot of these properties. How are we to expand our housing base and move to a more sustainable model of development so that the city can continue to grow and grow up without growing out constantly and encroaching on our natural environment?
Yeah. Thank you. I think those are great questions. So just north of me in that empty lot, one of the things that the developer was going to do is on Broadway, it was going to be single-story buildings, and then it was going to increase toward my street to 4-story apartment buildings right next to my street. All we asked is just flip that. Put the 4-story buildings on Broadway and then go down to 1-story. I mean, just literally flip the whole plan, and it would have been not offensive to the neighbors that live on the north side of my street, who would have had 3 stories of residents looking into their backyard windows. So another thing is I really do believe I'm a Democrat through and through, right? I believe in the environment. I believe in education. I believe in humanity. I know that we have it in us to solve a lot of these problems in the world. But I'm also sort of starting to be a little more fiscally conservative. I think when the city spends, I'm not sure how many of you have been up on Oracle, just north of Grant Road. They built those Milagro affordable housing units, and it was a no-tell motel. It's a 4-story apartment building, and then just north of that, and that's brand new construction, and then just north of that was another historical hotel. They're beautiful. By the way, my niece is a mechanical engineer, and she did the drafting for the HVAC. So I wanted to see how everything looked, because I also am so proud of what she did. But back to those buildings, when I was touring them 3 Thursdays ago, I think was a grand opening. somebody, not me, but somebody else asked the city person that was in the three bedroom unit. So it was the hotel, the refurbished hotel north of the high rise. By the way, when I say high rise, I'm talking Tucson. Anything more than 3 units is a high rise in Tucson. So the city employee told us that the price differential to refurbish the 2 hotels per square foot was 5 times the dollar amount as building new construction. So Michael, as far as how we could do some of these things reasonably, maybe let's not be in the business of buying properties that need to be rehabilitated and refurbished. Let's buy properties that we can tear down the buildings. We can build brand new infrastructure, because building when you don't have to refurbish something is we're also dealing with that at Pima Community College right now. It's way cheaper to build bottom up than it is to refurbish old buildings. So there's one way that I think we can instead of trying to do all of these things, let's just focus on new housing for the unhoused, or new affordable housing for people who need affordable housing. As far as the environment and water, all of that we have to be concerned with. And I'm just going to jump back to my whole platform about education. A long time ago when I moved here, I heard from a city worker that if your trash can isn't full, don't take it to your street, because every time those hydraulics have to lift up your trash can and dump it out, it costs, and I can't remember what it was at the time, but it was like $3.57 in wear and tear on the vehicle and the maintenance and the oil and all of that kind of stuff. So I've been living under that principle my whole life, right? If it's not full, don't take it out to the street. And so, sometimes weeks go by when I don't take my trash out. Some of my neighbors, they take their trash out, and sometimes I'm walking my dogs and I wonder, has the trash gone by yet? And I'll look in and they'll have one little teeny plastic sack of goods in there. And I'm like, that is such a waste. So I believe in education as far as water use. I was at a meeting at Arizona Education Retired maybe 5 or 6 months ago, and somebody from Tucson Water came and talked to us. And there are all sorts of things that we can do as a community to preserve our water and make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck, so there'll be water for future generations. None of us are going to be happy if we don't have water in 70, well, I won't be alive in 70 years, but maybe my children will be, right? So I think that we need to pay attention to those kind of things. We need to look at green infrastructure, excuse me, water harvesting, gray water use. In the past, when I first looked into gray water use, the hurdles needed to get through that with city planning and coding was insurmountable for me. I was employed at the time, obviously. I didn't have a lot of spare time on my hands, but I wonder if we can if we can streamline those processes so all of us could opt in for, using gray water to water our plants outside instead of using the water that's coming through the city pipes. So there's just all sorts of things we can do.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there for policy change that would be positive for Tucson. Since you're strong on education and you identify yourself as a fiscal realist, let's say, let's not use the word conservative. I would suggest you go to a 501c3 called strongtowns.org. They have lots of information about how to build a stronger, more sustainable city in the urban planning, the zoning, the financial planning, all of that. So I'd recommend that to you. Looks like we have a hand up from Lillian Fox there.
Okay, Lillian, your hand is up.
Okay, and my mute is off. One thing I will tell you, 50 years ago, Denver made it a law that you could only use water every other day for the lawn or washing your car. So if you were an even numbered house, you got to use it on certain days of the week. If you were odd numbered, different. We haven't done anything like that in Tucson, and we're sadly lacking in public education. Now, kind of back to my question. Oh, one of the things that's making housing unaffordable is so many condos, low-cost condos are snapped up by investors. A friend of mine lives in a low-cost condo. She needs to buy a first floor when she can't live on the second floor anymore. And she's finding all her offers are from investors and they'll pay cash right now. And that's what's happened to most of the condos where she lives. The other thing, back to affordable housing again, one of the things that's happened to rents in Tucson, they've gotten so expensive. We have people who have incomes who are homeless. I know a couple of people like that. The rent went so high, they had to move out and they couldn't find any place they could afford. And one of the ways the owners of these apartment complexes do it, rent is regulated by the state. You can't do anything about it, but they add extra charges all the time. In the middle of your lease, they might decide you're going to pay $100 a month for water or $100 a person per water, or that they add all kinds of charges and your lease is no protection because it's not rent. And so what are you going to do to deal with these issues at the city level, or what can you do?
So Lillian, that's a great question. I don't think we can mandate people to be neighborly and good. But I do think that there are options. And by the way, I heard recently that the state has nixed a lot of these ideas that cities in Arizona have had about regulating rents and regulating who can buy properties in our cities. So, you know, we'll have to, who we elect matters so much on all sorts of different levels. Okay, so back to the question. I have two houses on the west side of town on by Main and Speedway, and I own two properties. The north property has two houses. The south property is vacant. I'm thinking about putting some small houses on there. I've always charged $250 a month per bedroom. So the back house goes for $250. The front house goes for $500. And that's just enough for me to pay my property tax and my rental property insurance. And I'm not making a killing. I'm making a little bit of money on it, but it goes into a fund. So when the washing machines crash, I can buy a new washing machine without having to dip in my savings. Maybe there's something the city can do as far as, you know, tax credits or things like that for people who are willing to rent their you know, apartments or their condos for reasonable amounts of money. Now, by the way, when I say reasonable, I think that a homeowner or a property owner should be able to pay all of the bills associated with the property and make enough money so it's you know, an income maker. But I don't think we need to you know, rob our people who are trying just to eke by and they can't afford to own their own property.
I'm just curious, do you have any information about all these crazy things that are happening with our current White House that will just give me maybe one or two that will really be of concern to the city?
That the White House is doing?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't think the city has any responsiveness to this, but by getting rid of the Department of Education, you know, I'm focused on that. I don't have any children and I don't have any grandchildren in schools, but when we eradicate the Department of Education, so much is regulated by that department. Students who have IEPs, individual education plans.
Program.
Yeah. For our students who need specialized learning, specialized instruction, all of that is now going to be relegated to the states to take care of. And our state has not been at all responsive to the educational needs of our students in Arizona. So that's one huge concern. I was up in Washington, D.C. all last week talking to our legislators, to our elected officials in the House and in the Senate. And one thing that really concerned me was, and I hope I never think this about myself, was I heard on numerous occasions, there's nothing we can do. And I think there's always something we can do as elected officials, right? We can educate our population. We can talk about the issues at hand. We don't have to call names. We don't have to tell how horrible the other person is, but we need to make sure that we give people the education that they need in order to make good decisions. So, Lucy, I'm not sure, some of the other things, some of the other things that are going on right now, I mean, I think for us to get crazy and to lose our sanity is not healthy. I think we need to be positive and proactive. I think Lucy's heard me say this before in our AEA meetings, but I think that, be irritated and upset for a little while if there's an issue that is happening at the federal level, but then turn off that frustration and get online and write or call one of your elected officials and just to let them know how important it is that they stand up for what is right for, for Southern Arizonans.
Thank you, Theresa. You know that I agree with you, and I'll be there.
I have to go back to what you were talking about, Theresa, about the no-tell motel and the fact that it cost a little more to build up rather than find another piece of land. I think you're totally wrong on that. I think that's not the plan that Tucson has in mind. I don't know how long you've been here, maybe longer than me, that's possible. But no-tell motel has been a fixture, and it's kind of cool in a way. Not that I know much that goes on in there, but I've heard. It's something that what would we do with it if we didn't put homeless people in there or build low-income apartments? That's my question, first of all. And if it costs more to build up rather than out, we've got to build up here. This has been a problem in Tucson forever. Everybody wants their one-story house, and they don't want to build up. Now we're building up. That's what the whole plan was about. So I wish you would rethink that. I know it would cost more. Of course, it would cost more to build up because you have to build several floors. But you've got to realize that. And if it costs more, it costs more. So that I don't know what to say, except that I was disappointed when you did say that you're going to find more land somewhere else to build. And that's exactly what Mike was talking about. I think with the sprawl, well, he didn't use that word, but building out is the problem. That corner has bus stops on it. There's a store there, several stores that they can access, people can access by the bus, not have to have a car if they can't afford one or don't want to have one. So you've got to look at every aspect of the property rather than just the fact that it's going to cost more to rehab an older building. And I guess that's Mike's going to, or Joe's going to shut me up in a second. So that's.
Thank you, Lee. I'm not against building up. I'm just saying that if you have a plan for development, like in my neighborhood, and it
But we're
started.
talking about Oracle and Grant, not your neighborhood.
Okay, well, even there, my point there wasn't that we shouldn't refurbish buildings, but there are two priorities, let's say. One priority is to do historic preservation. It's a great priority. I'm not against historic preservation at all. Our second priority is to increase housing for the people who have no housing at all, or for the people who would like to start owning their own houses, right? And my point is, maybe the city shouldn't invest in properties that have houses that need to be historically preserved if we're trying to increase the number of housing units, right? If like on the property where the bump steer was on Stone, I think it was Stone, right? The city bought that property and it's empty, right? That there's nothing on there. So as far as preservation, if preservation costs 5 times as much, according to that one woman from the city who said it to the person who asked in my group, the city could do 5 times as much building if they did not preserve the historical buildings, is what I'm saying. So I think that what we have to do is we have to make sure our priorities are being met. And let's just say
one of our priorities is to preserve the historical buildings. And that should be up at the top rather than tear down something and start over. I'm not
that's
quite
not what I
sure where
said.
you're going.
But that's not what I said, right? I said that if the city's priority is to house the unhoused,
And historic building renewal at the same time.
right, but what I'm saying is maybe if historical building renewal doesn't have to be homes, right? It can be businesses and things like that. If we're trying to build homes, we do need to go up. We do need to build big, right? They didn't go up on those historical homes, right? The hotels are still 1 story. So all I'm just saying is that sometimes when you put too many priorities together, it clouds the water and we don't really get the best bang for our buck. That's all I'm saying. I think we can
Okay,
look into those.
let's leave it there. We got some other folks.
Okay,
Mike,
thank you.
we have someone in the chat room with a question.
Yeah, a couple. First of all, Christina, who's the president of Iskashida Network, which does refugee resettlement assistance, wants to know if you have any thoughts about refugee resettlement in particular, because she works with refugees, and obviously it's a big political sore spot for a lot of people.
Yes. Thank you, Christina, for all you do and your organization. I know that Pima Community College has the 29th Street Coalition, and we have a lot of the recently arrived refugees who are taking English as a second language and working toward their GEDs and things like that. I think that needs to be a priority. I think the more diverse our communities are, the better we will be. I do know that there was some talk, and I wasn't involved in the discussion, but they were talking about the federal levels of terminating some of those programs too. I know that we have quite a few people who have already arrived and who are still arriving, and I do think it's important that the city make sure we take care of those people in the best way we can also, which means housing, education for their children, transportation costs, whether it be Suntran or however they need to get around. Yeah, and I do think that Canada, I'm not 100% familiar with this, but my relatives are from Canada. And I do know that they give, and this is on the federal level, they give all of their immigrants a year to learn their languages, English and French. And here in the United States, I don't think we do that hardly at all. We want them to be working right away. And sometimes it's hard to work and learn at the same time. But yeah, I think we need to make sure that our refugee programs here in Tucson are definitely supported, and that we find the funding sources to make sure that it's sustainable.
Okay, Mike, any more questions in the chat?
Karen Gleason wants to know how we're going to handle the attacks on federal funds that Tucson has come to rely on. So how are we going to backfill some of those programs that apparently Trump seems to be attacking?
Yeah, that's a very serious situation. Same thing with Pima Community College. We lost state funding for operations for Pima Community College in 2016. So we get $0 from the state. And now the feds are going to be cutting many of our grant programs too. It's concerning. And I think that once again, it's just looking at the pie. It's paying attention to the budget. It's making sure that when you figure out how much money do we have to spend, that we spend it for the first of all, the things we have to spend it on. And maybe for some years we won't be able to have the extracurriculars. I'm talking about for the community college, and I'm talking about for the city, right? But the city's budget is I mean, some of it, of course, is like the city doesn't have any, the council and the mayor don't have any control over, right? But the part that the council and the mayor has control over, they need to pay attention to what they're spending the monies on. Some of those programs that we're getting from some of the monies that we're getting from the federal government, most likely in grants, when those are not flowing anymore, we need to make sure that if it's one of our programs in the city that must be funded, we need to figure out how to fund it. And then if it's a program that might be, that we can't do anymore, then we need to take the serious look at it and do the right thing with our money.
Okay, Steve Linder has a question, and then Ben after Steve.
Hi, Teresa. It's been my pleasure to work closely with Teresa on the AEA retired board, and I would certainly support her campaign. My question is, with all of the immigration frenzy that's going on right now, what do you see as the role of the of Tucson as a city in dealing with all of this? Because it's affecting everything, including our schools, where students are not even attending schools. They're afraid to go to schools because they don't know what's going to be happening at home. They don't know what's going to be happening if their parents are going to be there. And I'm wondering if it's affecting the attendance at Pima Community. But where do you see the role of the city in all of this?
So our law enforcement is charged with, upholding laws and protecting all of its citizens. And I think that protecting the people who live here is just as important. And I think that I have not heard of ICE coming into any of Pima Community College's buildings, but I have heard about ICE coming into other places of employment and intimidating people. I know that Laura Conover sent out a statement a week or two ago saying that, that ICE is required to follow all of our laws. And one of the laws is they're not supposed to enter buildings if they don't have a court order. And so I think once again, it's about education. It's making sure all of our staff at all of our, school buildings, K through 12 and at the community college, know what is required. And if the people who show up and are, intimidating or maybe, I mean, I hate to say this, but maybe they are doing their job, they still need to follow the law. And the law says that they have to have a court order. Excuse me.
Okay, Ben.
So on a similar note to the last two, completely share your belief on education being sort of central to everything. So as far as both specifically ensuring that we continue to have education access to students who maybe live in mixed families, as you mentioned, but also in your conversations with the infrastructure of our society and how it sets people up to have access to be able to go to Pima Community College or be able to go to the University of Arizona. What changes do you want to make in your role as city councilor to address the concerns you've heard from your students as far as what's keeping them back from getting an education? And more specifically, how do you want to build a relationship that has not truly existed between the city and the University of Arizona to have a more coherent relationship between one of the city's biggest employers and the city itself?
That's a great question. I don't think the city has any direct role in like attendance and things like that. I think once again, it's all about knowledge is power, right? If a youngster knows that by going to school, graduating from a high school in Tucson in Southern Arizona, that you can go to Pima Community College directly, right? A lot of people don't know that, and they don't realize how inexpensive Pima Community College is. So I think that I don't necessarily think this is a city initiative to get into high schools, but Pima is definitely going to start going to high schools and middle schools more often to reach out to students. As far as truancy, if there's a truancy problem, right? I think that part of not going to school is children make bad choices when they're not in school, K through 12. And I think that maybe the city can do a partnership with U of A, with Pima Community College, to remind all citizens that going to college is a right for you. It's in our state constitution saying community college should be as nearly free as possible. By the way, for all of you out there listening to this, tuition for those of us 52 and older is half price at Pima Community College. So if you're dying to learn something new, get out there and take a new class. Our recycling program here in Tucson, there's one thing that I think the city could do a way better job is collaborating with our elementary schools around town, making sure that the children know what is recyclable and what is not, and then the kids could teach the parents. There's all sorts of knowledge is power, and when we don't educate our young people the right way, they just we make mistakes and we end up causing ourselves lots of grief.
Right. So let's give Theresa a big thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Theresa, thanks for sharing so much good, great, brutal information. That's something we have to work on. And I think it was Andrea Kennedy said that we need to respond. No, I think someone said we respond, Democrats respond. And I think that's so true. And we have to, it's not always easy. And sometimes it takes a little work, but we respond. So, and again, great questions, lots of conversation. We have a great program because of the speakers and because of the participants. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey everybody, it's Senator Mark Kelly. As all of you know, Arizona Democrats have had a lot of important wins over the last few years. We won 2 U.S. Senate races, and we delivered Arizona's electoral votes to President Biden and Vice President Harris. We elected Governor Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, and Attorney General Chris Mays. Now, those elections were close, and our victories mattered. Arizona Democrats from the federal to the local level have delivered real results for our state on critical issues like combating climate change, lowering prescription drug costs, protecting the right to vote, and preventing more restrictions on abortion access. The Democrats of Greater Tucson offers the opportunity to hear from elected officials and candidates about that important work and the issues that matter to them. That information will be invaluable as Arizonans head to the polls. So this election cycle, whether you're signing up to knock doors, make phone calls, or joining the Democrats of Greater Tucson to hear from and speak to Democrats in our area, please know that your voice matters and we need you on this team. Thank you.